Nice car for someone like you. Step out, now." The deputy's hand rested on his holster. Not gripping, not yet, but positioned. A promise of what could come next. Simone Calloway kept both hands on the steering wheel, 10 and 2, exactly where they'd been since she first saw the blue lights in her rearview mirror. The Alabama sun baked through the windshield at 94 degrees, turning the black Mercedes into a slow cooker, but she didn't reach for the air conditioning. Didn't reach for anything. The deputy had no idea he'd just pulled over a woman who'd spent the last 11 years prosecuting officers exactly like him. "I said step out." His voice carried that particular edge she'd heard in hundreds of body cam recordings, the tone that preceded escalation, that gave officers plausible deniability when things went wrong. I felt threatened. She wasn't complying. I had no choice. She'd written those words into federal complaints, she'd read them in depositions, she'd heard them from witness stands in courtrooms across the country. Now she was hearing them directed at her. "Deputy, may I ask the reason for this stop?" The question came out calm, measured. Not confrontational, but not submissive either. The voice of someone who understood exactly what was happening and was documenting every second of it. His badge caught the sunlight as he shifted. Number 7241. Lundy J., according to the nameplate. Late 20s or early 30s. Built like someone who spent more time in the gym than in the statute books. His jaw tightened at her question. "License and registration. Don't make me repeat myself." Simone moved her right hand slowly, deliberately, narrating each motion. "I'm reaching into the glove compartment for my registration. My license is in my wallet in the center console." The folder was already prepared. Documents in order. Registration on top. Insurance card beneath. Driver's license in the clear plastic sleeve at the front. She'd organized them that morning before leaving Houston, the same way she organized them every time she drove through rural stretches of the Deep South. Habit, survival, both. If you're new here, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next. She extended the folder through the window, and Lundy snatched it with more force than necessary. His eyes moved from the Texas plates to the leather interior to the navigation screen glowing softly on the dashboard, then back to her. "This your car?" "Yes, sir. Registration confirms that." "Where'd you get money for a car like this?" The question hung in the hot air between them, its implications impossible to miss. Where did someone like you get a car like this? Someone black. Someone female. Someone who shouldn't be driving a Mercedes E-Class through Cutler County, Alabama, at 2:47 on a Tuesday afternoon. Simone didn't answer. The question wasn't really a question. It was a statement dressed up in interrogative clothing, a way of saying you don't belong here without using those exact words. Lundy waited 3 seconds, then turned and walked back to his patrol car without another word. Underscore, 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 underscore. 6 hours earlier, Simone had stood on the porch of her father's house in Houston's 3rd Ward, watching him wave goodbye through the screen door. Earl Calloway, 68 years old, 3 rounds of chemotherapy into his fight with pancreatic cancer, still insisted on standing to see his daughter off. "You could fly," he'd said. "American has a direct to Montgomery. I need the drive." What she hadn't said, she needed 18 hours alone with her thoughts, with case files she couldn't review on planes, with the weight of decisions she'd have to make when she returned to Washington next week. The Meridian County investigation was entering its final phase. The Patterson consent decree needed her signature by Friday, and somewhere in the stack of briefs on her passenger seat was the preliminary report on Chambers County that would determine whether the Department of Justice opened a 7th pattern or practice investigation in Alabama this decade. 7. In one state. Because some systems didn't evolve, they just found new ways to stay the same. "Call when you get to Montgomery," her father had said. "I will." And Simone. His voice carried the particular gravity of a man who'd lived through Jim Crow, who'd marched in Selma, who'd watched his daughter rise through law school and federal clerkships and trial divisions, while never quite believing the country had changed as much as her career suggested. "Be careful." She'd hugged him carefully, mindful of how thin he'd become, how fragile his frame felt beneath the cotton robe. "I'm always careful, Dad." Before starting the car, she'd photographed the odometer, the insurance card, the registration, the dashboard, the exterior from 4 angles. She'd emailed the images to herself with a timestamp, then sent copies to her personal cloud storage and to Yolanda Abrams in Houston with a single-line message: "Driving to Montgomery. ETA midnight. Check in every 4 hours. Paranoid, some people called it. Prepared, Simone called it. The distinction was academic until it wasn't. Underscore, 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 underscore. Back on Highway 231, 8 minutes had passed since Lundy returned to his patrol car. 8 minutes to run plates that would come back clean, to check for warrants that didn't exist, to find any justification for what he'd already decided to do. Simone watched through the rearview mirror as he spoke into his radio, his free hand gesturing in ways that suggested frustration. The plates were registered to her, the car was paid off, her license was current, her insurance was valid. There was nothing to find because there was nothing to find. But nothing to find had never stopped a determined officer from finding something. The dispatch crackled through her open window, loud enough to catch fragments. 7 Adam, possible stolen, black female mid-30s, requesting backup, possible stolen, no report, no bolo, no alert from any database in any jurisdiction. Just a black woman in a nice car and an officer who'd decided that combination was inherently suspicious. Simone reached slowly for her phone, activated the voice recorder, and set it face down on the passenger seat. The motion was casual, unhurried, invisible to anyone watching from behind. Another habit, another preparation. The phone would capture audio even if nothing else survived. Underscore, 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 underscore. Lundy approached from the driver's side again, but this time he positioned himself slightly behind the door pillar, a tactical stance that gave him cover and limited her angle of vision. His right hand had moved closer to his holster. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step out of the vehicle." "Am I being detained, deputy?" "I'm conducting an investigation." "An investigation requires reasonable articulable suspicion of criminal activity." "What specific behavior are you investigating?" The words came out before she could stop them. Muscle memory from 1,000 depositions, 1,000 cross-examinations, 1,000 moments of holding officers accountable for the precise language they used to justify their actions. She caught herself too late, saw his eyes narrow at the terminology that didn't match what he expected from the woman behind the wheel. "Are you a lawyer or something?" The question was half accusation, half uncertainty. Simone filed it away. Lawyer was apparently the only profession he could imagine that would explain her vocabulary. "I'm asking a simple question, deputy. What crime do you suspect I've committed?" Lundy's jaw worked. His hand moved another inch toward his weapon. "You were speeding." "I was traveling at 33 miles per hour in a posted 35 zone. Your dash cam will confirm that. Your taillight's out." "Both taillights were operational when I departed this morning, and I haven't been notified of any malfunction. But I'm happy to step out and verify if you'd like to show me which light you're referring to." She'd called his bluff, and he knew it. The taillight excuse was one of the oldest pretexts in traffic enforcement, impossible to disprove after the fact, rarely questioned when the driver was too scared or too tired or too eager to get home to challenge it. Simone wasn't scared, wasn't tired, and wasn't going anywhere until she understood exactly what she was dealing with. Lundy pressed the button on his radio without breaking eye contact. 7 Adam to dispatch, requesting backup at my location. Driver is being uncooperative. Uncooperative. The word would appear in his report, in his justification, in every document generated by whatever happened next. She'd seen it hundreds of times, the linguistic alchemy that transformed constitutional awareness into non-compliance, that turned knowing your rights into resisting arrest. "I'm not being uncooperative, deputy. I'm asking questions that I'm legally entitled to ask. There's a difference." He didn't respond. Just stood there, weight shifting, waiting for backup that would tilt the balance of power further in his direction. Simone kept her hands on the wheel and started counting seconds. Underscore, 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 underscore. The second patrol car arrived in 4 minutes, a white SUV with the Cutler County Sheriff's star on the door. It pulled to a stop in front of the Mercedes, blocking any forward exit. Deliberate positioning, tactical. The driver stepped out with the unhurried confidence of someone who'd done this many times before. Female, mid-40s, silver-streaked hair pulled back in a tight bun, face carefully neutral. Her nameplate read, Adler, C. Her badge number was 4892. Simone added both to the mental file she was building, the documentation that existed only in her memory until she could commit it to paper or recording. Adler approached Lundy first, a brief conference conducted in voices just low enough to blur through the open window. Fragments carried, Plates came back clean, and, look at her, look at the car. And then clearly, possible trafficking corridor. Trafficking corridor. Simone almost laughed. She had access to every federal database tracking human trafficking routes in the southeastern United States. Highway 231 through Cutler County appeared in exactly none of them. The nearest documented corridor was 140 miles east, centered on Interstate 85 between Montgomery and Atlanta. But accuracy wasn't the point. Justification was the point. Building a narrative that would survive scrutiny, or at least survive the first few layers of scrutiny, which was usually enough. Adler turned and approached the Mercedes, her posture professional, her voice carrying a tone of practiced reasonableness that was somehow more unsettling than Lundy's open hostility. "Ma'am, I'm Deputy Adler. We've had reports of vehicles matching this description involved in trafficking activity along this corridor. For your safety and ours, I'm going to need you to step out of the vehicle so we can conduct a search." "May I have the case number for that report, Deputy?" The question landed like a stone dropped into still water. Adler's expression flickered just for a moment before the professional mask resettled. "I'm not at liberty to discuss ongoing investigations." "Then I'm not at liberty to consent to a search. The Fourth Amendment protects against unreasonable searches and seizures, and a traffic stop doesn't provide blanket authority to search a vehicle without consent, a warrant, or probable cause." Adler's eyes met hers through the open window. Something passed between them, a recognition that this wasn't going the way these interactions usually went. Simone saw calculation happening behind those eyes, the rapid assessment of options and consequences. "Ma'am, refusing to cooperate only makes this harder for everyone." "I'm not refusing to cooperate. I'm exercising constitutional rights that exist specifically for situations like this. There's a difference, and I think you know it." Adler stepped back, said something to Lundy that Simone couldn't hear, then walked toward the edge of the road, where a small white church sat behind a gravel parking lot. Beulah AME, according to the sign. A man stood beside an old pickup truck in the lot, watching everything with the particular stillness of someone who'd learned long ago that witnessing was sometimes the only power available. He had his phone raised, camera pointed at the scene on the highway. "Sir, this is an active police scene." Adler's voice carried across the distance. "I'm going to need you to stop recording and move along." "I'm on church property, Deputy." The man's voice was deep, weathered, calm. "First Amendment protects my right to document public officials in the performance of their duties. I'm not interfering. I'm witnessing." Adler took a step toward him, then another, and that left Simone alone with Lundy. Underscore 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 underscore. "You know, you're making this real hard on yourself." Lundy had moved closer while Adler was distracted, his body now positioned inches from the open window. Simone could smell his cologne, something aggressive and cheap, and beneath it the particular odor of someone running hot in the afternoon sun. "I'm not making anything hard, Deputy. I'm asking questions and exercising rights." "Rights," he laughed, a short, ugly sound. "You think rights mean something out here? This isn't Houston. This isn't whatever city you came from. This is Cutler County, and in Cutler County, we do things different." Simone filed the statement. "We do things different. An admission of alternative standards. Valuable if it came to litigation." "Different how?" He leaned closer, close enough that his breath fogged against the window frame. "Different enough that you should have shown some respect when I asked nice. Now we're past nice." Before she could respond, another engine sounded in the distance. A third patrol car, a Crown Victoria with sergeant's stripes on the door, pulled onto the shoulder behind Lundy's vehicle. The driver emerged slowly, a man in his early 50s with the weathered look of someone who'd been doing this job since before Lundy was born. His nameplate read, "Meacham." T. Sergeant's chevrons on his sleeve. Badge number 3847. Meacham took in the scene with a single sweep. The Mercedes with Texas plates, the black woman behind the wheel, Lundy standing too close with his hand too near his weapon, Adler at the church arguing with a civilian holding a phone. "What do we have, Lundy?" "Suspicious vehicle. Drivers being difficult." "Difficult how?" "Asking questions, quoting case law. Won't let us search the car." Meacham's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his posture. He approached the Mercedes, positioning himself beside Lundy but slightly further back, giving himself room to observe. "Ma'am, I'm Sergeant Meacham. Can you tell me where you're headed today?" "Houston." "Visiting family?" "Long drive from Texas plates?" "Highway 231 is the most direct route from Montgomery to Dothan, then west on I-10. I assume that's not illegal." He nodded slowly. "You been through Cutler County before? First time? Where are you coming from today?" I'd prefer not to discuss my travel history, Sergeant. I've provided license and registration as required. I'm not aware of any violation that would justify further detention. Meacham studied her. Unlike Lundy's hostile glare, this was assessment. Careful, professional, the look of someone trying to fit a puzzle piece into a picture that didn't quite match. Ma'am, my deputies say you refuse to consent to a search. That's correct. Consent searches require voluntary agreement, and I don't voluntarily agree. And if we have probable cause? Then I'd ask you to articulate it on the record for your body cam before proceeding. The department's own vehicle says. She nodded toward Lundy's patrol car, where a decal on the rear window declared, "All interactions recorded for your protection and ours." Deputy Lundy's camera has been active since initial contact, I assume? The silence that followed lasted exactly 3 seconds. If this story already has you hooked, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Trust me, tomorrow's episode is one you won't want to miss. Underscore, 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 underscore. 47 minutes had passed since the initial stop. Simone had been pulled over for 47 minutes without citation, without charge, without any justification beyond suspicious vehicle and the color of her skin. In that time, 3 officers had arrived. A civilian witness had been threatened. Multiple fabricated justifications had been offered and abandoned, and still she sat in her own car, hands on the wheel, waiting to see how far they would take it. She knew how far they could take it. She'd read the case files, interviewed the survivors, documented the outcomes for people who looked like her in towns like this. She'd visited grieving families and studied autopsy reports and counted the seconds between stop resisting and silence. 47 minutes was nothing. Some people didn't make it 47 seconds. Meacham had stepped away to make a phone call, his back to the Mercedes, voice too low to hear. Lundy remained in position, occasionally speaking into his radio, his frustration visible in the set of his shoulders. Adler had returned from the church, the witness apparently undeterred, and was now conferring with someone else who'd arrived in an unmarked sedan. Civilian clothes, but with the bearing of authority. Simone watched the sedan's driver approach Meacham. A brief exchange, both men looking toward the Mercedes. Then Meacham returned. "Ma'am, I'm placing you under arrest for obstruction of governmental operations." The words dropped like stones into water. "Under what statute, Sergeant?" "Alabama Code Section 13A10-2. Simone didn't react, not outwardly. She'd read the statute. She'd memorized the statute. She'd prosecuted officers for misapplying the statute. Section 13A10-2 requires proof that a person intentionally obstructed, impaired, or hindered a governmental function by means of intimidation, physical force, or interference. I haven't done any of those things. I've asked questions and declined to consent to a search. Neither action meets the statutory elements. You can argue that with the judge. I intend to, but for the record, on your body cam that I assume is recording, I am being arrested for exercising constitutional rights without any conduct that meets the elements of the stated charge. Meacham's face was stone. "Please step out of the vehicle, ma'am." Simone moved slowly, deliberately. She released the door handle with her left hand, pushed the door open, placed both feet on the ground, and stood with her hands immediately visible at shoulder height. "Turning around now, placing hands behind my head." She'd watched enough body cam footage to know exactly what positions minimized the risk of furtive movements, justifications, exactly what language created the clearest record of compliance. She executed each motion like a choreographed sequence, narrating each step for whatever camera might still be recording. Lundy approached with handcuffs already drawn. "Hands behind your back." She lowered her hands to the small of her back, wrists crossed. The cuffs clicked shut, tight, too tight, metal biting into flesh, pressure on the bones of her wrists that would leave marks. "The handcuffs are causing pain due to excessive tightness. I am requesting they be loosened." Lundy's breath was close to her ear. "You should have thought about that before you started playing lawyer." He didn't loosen them. Adler appeared at her side, notepad in hand, already writing, controlling the narrative before Simone had even been transported. The report would say uncooperative. It would say refused lawful commands. It would say whatever it needed to say to justify what they'd already done. Meacham watched from the sergeant's distance, close enough to supervise, but far enough to maintain deniability. The man from the unmarked sedan remained at the edge of the scene, taking notes of his own. And across the highway at the edge of the church parking lot, the witness with the phone was still recording. Underscore, 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 underscore. Underscore, 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 underscore. The The back of Lundy's patrol car smelled like disinfectant and fear. Simone had been in police vehicles before. She'd reviewed hundreds of them for evidence, studied their layout for deposition questions, noted the placement of cameras and controls, and the particular claustrophobia of the rear compartment's plastic molding. But she'd never been in one like this. Hands cuffed behind her, door locked, cage separating her from the driver's seat. The air conditioning wasn't running. The windows were sealed. Afternoon sun baked through the glass at 94 degrees, and within minutes she felt sweat pooling at the small of her back, dampening the linen dress she'd chosen for comfort on an 18-hour drive. Lundy took his time getting in. He exchanged words with Adler, with Meacham, with the man from the sedan. He checked his phone. He adjusted his duty belt. He did everything except start the engine and transport his prisoner to booking. When he finally climbed into the driver's seat, he took a moment to adjust the rearview mirror so he could see her clearly. "You know, you could have made this easy." His voice was almost conversational, the menace now smooth instead of rough. "Just show some respect. Answer some questions. Let us do a quick search to make sure everything's clean. Then you'd be on your way." Simone said nothing. "Silent treatment, huh? That's fine. We got ways of dealing with people like you. People like you." She filed it away with everything else. The phrase would appear in her complaint. It would appear in the federal investigation. It would appear in the trial that Russell Day, county attorney, couldn't even imagine was coming. The car finally started moving, but Lundy drove slowly, taking the long route, adding minutes to a trip that should have taken 5. The air grew thicker, hotter. Simone focused on her breathing, on maintaining composure, on the mental catalog of violations she was building with each passing second. Obstruction charge, insufficient elements. Extended detention, unreasonable under Rodriguez v. United States. Excessive force, handcuff tightness, cruel conditions, denial of climate control to restrain prisoner. Each violation was a line in a complaint. Each complaint was a brick in a case. Each case was leverage against a system that had never been successfully challenged, until now. Underscore, underscore, underscore. Underscore, underscore, underscore. Underscore, 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 underscore. Cutler. County Jail was a low-slung brick building that looked like it had been constructed during the Nixon administration and hadn't seen significant renovation since. The parking lot was cracked asphalt. The entrance was around back rather than through the public-facing front, and the smell hit as soon as Lundy opened the rear door. Bleach, sweat, and something underneath both that spoke of institutional neglect. "Out!" Simone maneuvered herself upright with difficulty, the cuffs limiting her mobility, her wrists screaming with each motion. She stepped onto the asphalt and immediately felt her heel catch on a crack. She stumbled, caught herself, felt Lundy's hand grip her upper arm with unnecessary force. "Clumsy," he said, loud enough for anyone watching to hear. "Careful there." The grip tightened as he steered her toward the rear entrance, and Simone felt his fingers dig into muscle. It would bruise. That was the point. Inside, the booking area was staffed by a single officer behind a high counter, a woman with tired eyes and a uniform that looked like it had seen better days. Behind her, a whiteboard listed current inmates by cell number, and the clock on the wall showed 3:52 p.m. Just over an hour since the initial stop. An eternity by the standards of a routine traffic encounter. Barely a beginning by the standards of what could come next. "Charge?" The booking officer's voice was flat, professional. "Obstruction of governmental operations." Simone watched the officer's fingers pause over the keyboard. A brief flicker of something, skepticism, recognition of the charge's thinness. Then the fingers resumed typing. "Ma'am, I need your full name." "Simona Daura Calloway." "Date of birth?" "April 15th, 1985. "Current address?" 2847 Volta Place Northwest, Washington, District of Columbia, 20007. Another pause. "Washington, D.C., the nation's capital. Federal territory." The officer's eyes moved from the screen to Simone's face, something calculating in her expression. "Occupation?" "Attorney." Lundy shifted behind her. She felt rather than saw his reaction to the word. "What kind of attorney?" "I'd prefer not to elaborate beyond what's required for booking purposes." The officer studied her for a long moment, then resumed typing. The conversation she wasn't having, the one about federal jurisdiction and professional connections, and exactly how bad an idea this arrest might turn out to be, hung silently in the air between them. "Personal effects will be inventoried and stored. You'll receive a receipt upon release. Step this way for processing." The processing room was small, cinder-block walls painted institutional beige, a metal table bolted to the floor, a chair on each side. A female deputy stood waiting. Not Adler, someone younger, with the nameplate Oglesby, T, and badge number 4471. Simone noted both, adding them to the mental file that now contained dozens of entries. "Stand against the wall for photographs." She complied, facing the camera that would capture the image that might someday appear in newspapers or television broadcasts or federal court exhibits. Then profile left side, then profile right side. Fingerprints next, right hand first. The ink pad was cold, the pressure of the officer's grip professional but not aggressive, a notable contrast to Lundy's handling. Simone studied Deputy Oglesby's face as her prints were taken, looking for some indication of the woman's thoughts. Nothing. Professional blankness. Either genuine neutrality or practice protection. "Personal search will be conducted in the next room," Oglesby said. "Female officer only. Do you have any medical conditions I should be aware of?" "No." "Any medications you need access to?" "No." "Any injuries or complaints about your treatment during transport?" The question was standard, required by policy, probably asked of every prisoner who came through booking. But Oglesby's eyes met Simone's as she asked it, and something passed between them. An acknowledgement, perhaps, of conditions that existed outside what policy could address. The handcuffs were excessively tight. "My wrists are injured." Oglesby's gaze dropped to Simone's wrists, where red marks were already darkening toward purple. She said nothing, but she typed something into the tablet she was carrying, a notation that would exist in the official record, whatever else happened. "Follow me." The search room was smaller than the processing room, with a mirror along one wall that was probably two-way. Oglesby closed the door behind them, cutting off the view from the hallway. "I need you to remove your jewelry and place it on the table. Rings, watch, earrings, necklace if applicable." Simone had worn none of those things. Another habit, another preparation. Jewelry could be lost in custody, could be used as justification for strip searches, could become leverage or evidence, or both. "I'm not wearing any jewelry," Oglesby nodded. "I need to conduct a pat-down search. Standard procedure. I'll explain each step before I perform it." The search was thorough but professional. Nothing gratuitous, nothing designed to humiliate, nothing that went beyond what policy required. Simone noted the contrast with everything else that had happened since the blue lights first appeared in her mirror. Not all of them, then. Not every deputy in Cutler County had bought into whatever system Lundy and Adler and Meacham represented. When the search was complete, Oglesby stepped back. "You'll be assigned to a holding cell until your bond hearing. That's scheduled for tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Tomorrow morning? For an obstruction charge that should qualify for release on recognizance? Bond hearing schedule is set by the court, ma'am. I don't control it." Simone understood what she was really saying. "I don't control any of this. I'm just trying to do my job without becoming part of whatever's happening here. The arrest report will note that I was denied timely processing and held overnight on a misdemeanor charge without opportunity for immediate bond review." Something flickered in Oglesby's eyes. Fear, maybe, or recognition, or both. "The report will note whatever Sergeant Meacham writes in it, ma'am." Then she opened the door and called for someone to escort the prisoner to holding. Underscore, 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 underscore. The holding cell was exactly what Simone had expected. Concrete floor, metal bunk with a thin mattress, toilet without a lid, sink with rust stains, fluorescent light that buzzed at a frequency designed to prevent sleep. The door was solid steel, with a small window at eye level, currently dark. She sat on the edge of the bunk and began the work of documentation. 2:47 p.m., initial stop, Highway 231 mile marker, 42. Deputy Lundy, badge 7241. 2:49 p.m., first verbal contact, request for reason for stop deflected, demanded license and registration. 2:51 p.m., where'd you get money for a car like this? 2:55 p.m., Lundy returns to patrol car. Radio traffic audible, possible stolen, black female mid-30s. 3:02 p.m. Deputy Adler arrives, badge 4892. Approaches from front, blocking forward exit. 3:05 p.m. Adler fabricates trafficking corridor justification. No case number provided when requested. 3:08 p.m. Adler confronts civilian witness at Beulah AME Church. Attempts to stop recording. 3:12 p.m. Sergeant Meacham arrives, badge 3847. Takes command of scene. 3:25 p.m. Arrest announced. Charge: obstruction of governmental operations, Alabama Code Section 13, A-10-2. No elements of offense committed. 3:27 p.m. Handcuffs applied by Lundy. Excessively tight. Request to loosen denied. 3:30 p.m. Adler begins writing report before transport. 3:34 p.m. Transport begins. AC not engaged. Extended route taken. 3:52 p.m. Arrival at Cutler County Jail. Booking by unnamed female officer. 3:58 p.m. Processing by Deputy Oglesby. Badge 4471. Search conducted professionally. 4:15 p.m. Assigned to holding cell. Bond hearing scheduled for following morning. She committed each line to memory, then committed the memorization itself to memory, a layered redundancy that would survive even if everything else was taken from her. They could delete body cam footage, they could lose records, they could coordinate stories and prepare reports, and construct whatever narrative they wanted. They couldn't delete her memory, and her memory was very, very good. Underscore, 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 underscore. Hours passed. The fluorescent light continued its buzz. The temperature in the cell dropped as evening came, the inadequate insulation working in reverse to make the concrete box uncomfortably cold after being uncomfortably warm. Simone lay on the thin mattress, fully clothed, shoes still on, because she didn't trust what the floor might have hosted before her. She reviewed the mental file, adding details she'd initially overlooked, sharpening observations, preparing cross-examination questions she might never get to ask. Why did you dispatch backup for a routine traffic stop? What specific training have you received on pretextual stops? How often does your body cam malfunction? Who was the man in the unmarked sedan? That last question bothered her more than the others. Lundy was a frontline bully. Adler was a narrative manager. Meacham was an institutional protector. She understood their roles, could anticipate their behaviors. But the man in the sedan, civilian clothes, no badge visible, but carrying authority that even Meacham deferred to, didn't fit any standard pattern. County attorney? Possible. Political ally? Possible. Someone from outside Cutler County entirely? Possible. She needed more information. She needed her phone, her laptop, her databases, her network of colleagues who could run background checks and pull personnel files and identify the players in whatever game was being played. She had none of those things. She had a concrete cell and a thin mattress and the contents of her memory. It would have to be enough. Underscore. The door opened at 8:47 p.m., according to the clock in the hallway visible through the gap. Deputy Oglesby stood in the entrance, a clipboard in her hand. Miss Calloway, I need to verify your personal effects inventory. Standard procedure. Nothing unusual about the request. But Oglesby's voice was pitched differently than before. Lower, faster, the words running together as if she wanted to get through them quickly. Simone stood and approached the door. Oglesby read from the clipboard. Wallet, brown leather, containing credit cards, driver's license, and $43 cash. Keys, 3-on ring with Mercedes fob. Phone, iPhone model, black case. Folder containing vehicle registration and insurance documents. Pen, ballpoint blue ink? That's correct. Oglesby handed her the clipboard for signature, but as Simone took it, she felt something beneath the paper, a small folded note pressed against the clipboard's backing. Sign at the bottom, please. Simone signed, keeping her expression neutral, her movements unhurried. She handed the clipboard back, and in that exchange, the note transferred smoothly into her palm. Thank you, ma'am. Your property will be returned upon release. This story has so much more in store. Tap that subscribe button now so you don't miss a single moment. Oglesby turned and left without another word, pulling the door closed behind her. Simone waited 60 seconds, counting in her head, making sure no footsteps returned. Then she unfolded the note. The handwriting was small, precise, clearly written quickly. Body cam footage from Unit 7. Adam flagged for deletion, scheduled for 6 a.m. I have a copy. Sister made sure. Phone contact, YA Houston number. Simone read the note twice, memorizing every word, then tore it into tiny pieces and flushed it down the toilet. Unit 7 Adam was Lundy's designation. YA was Yolanda Abrams, her law school roommate, her former maid of honor, her emergency contact on the email she'd sent before leaving Houston. Oglesby had found Yolanda's contact information in Simone's phone. Oglesby had copied body cam footage that was scheduled for destruction. Oglesby had a sister, probably the T. Oglesby, who'd searched Simone professionally, who'd noted the wrist injuries, who'd asked questions that went slightly beyond standard booking procedure. The sisters had built an exit route, a backup, a way for the truth to survive even if Cutler County tried to bury it. Simone returned to the bunk, lay down, and allowed herself the first emotion she'd felt since the blue lights appeared in her mirror. Not relief, not gratitude. Anticipation. Underscore, 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 underscore. 9:42 p.m. Another visitor. This time it was Meacham, standing in the doorway in civilian clothes, jeans, polo shirt, windbreaker despite the warm evening. Off duty, or at least off uniform. The implications of that choice were worth noting. Miss Calloway? Sergeant. He stepped into the cell, letting the door close behind him, but not all the way. A calculated position. Enough privacy for conversation, enough gap for plausible deniability about what was discussed. I wanted to check on you. Make sure you're being treated appropriately. My wrists are bruised from your deputy's handcuffs. I've been held for over 6 hours on a charge that doesn't meet statutory elements. And I've been denied timely access to a bond hearing despite being a non-violent first-time arrestee with no flight risk factors. She kept her voice level, factual. Other than that, appropriately. Meacham absorbed this without visible reaction. He was good at that. The blank face, the neutral posture, the refusal to give anything away. Institutional experience, probably decades of it. Sometimes things don't go the way anyone expects. Deputy Lundy is young, hasn't learned when to step back from a situation. Things escalated that didn't need to escalate. Deputy Lundy called in a suspected stolen vehicle without any basis. Deputy Adler fabricated a trafficking corridor justification. You made the decision to arrest despite knowing the charge wouldn't hold. Simone sat up on the bunk, meeting his eyes. This wasn't escalation, Sergeant. This was execution. There's a difference. Something flickered in his expression. Not guilt exactly, but recognition that she was seeing things he'd hoped would remain unseen. Miss Calloway, you seem like someone who understands how systems work.
You know that sometimes there are pressures, expectations, ways of doing things that exist outside what policy manuals describe. I understand that better than you might think. Then you understand that fighting this, pressing charges, filing complaints, making noise, only makes things harder. For everyone. He paused, choosing his next words carefully. County Attorney Day handles all prosecutions in this jurisdiction. He has a lot of discretion about how cases proceed, or whether they proceed at all. Is that an offer, Sergeant? It's information. What you do with it is your choice. Simone leaned forward, elbows on knees, eyes locked on his. Let me give you some information in return. Everything that happened today was documented. Every word, every violation, every fabricated justification. The body cam footage that Deputy Lundy thinks was deleted. It wasn't. Your department's own policies regarding traffic stops, search and seizure, and use of force have been violated in ways that create personal liability for every officer involved. Meacham's blank expression slipped just slightly. Just enough. I don't know who you are, Miss Calloway, but I know you're not what you seem. Accountants don't quote Terry v. Ohio. Teachers don't know the elements of obstruction statutes. Whatever you are, whatever you're doing in Cutler County, you should think carefully about whether this is a fight you want. Simone stood slowly until she was face to face with him. Sergeant, I've spent my career fighting exactly this fight. In jurisdictions across this country, against officers and departments and systems that thought they were untouchable. She let the words land. And I want you to remember this moment, because in about 14 hours, you're going to wish you'd chosen differently. Meacham held her gaze for 3 seconds, then stepped back toward the door. Bond hearings at 9. County attorney will be present. I suggest you prepare your arguments. He left without another word. The night passed slowly, minutes stretching into hours, hours bleeding into early morning. Simone dozed in fragments, never fully asleep, her body cycling through the vigilance patterns she'd developed during 20-hour depositions and week-long trials. At 5:48 a.m., she heard movement in the hallway, footsteps, voices, the electronic chirp of card readers. Then nothing. Then more movement at 6:15, this time closer to her cell. 6 a.m., the scheduled deletion time for Lundy's body cam footage. Somewhere in this building, or somewhere connected to it, A server was being cleaned, files being overwritten, evidence being destroyed. Standard operating procedure for departments that had something to hide and no expectation of accountability. But Tamara Oglesby had a copy, and by now Yolanda Abrams had a copy too, probably on multiple servers, in multiple jurisdictions, beyond the reach of anyone in Cutler County. The trap was set. At 7:30, breakfast arrived, a tray pushed through a slot in the door containing something that might have been eggs, something that might have been toast, and coffee that was definitely more water than coffee. Simone ate mechanically, fueling the machine that would need to perform in 90 minutes. At 8:15, Deputy Oglesby arrived with a change of clothes, not Simone's own, but a jail-issued jumpsuit in institutional orange. "Standard procedure for court appearances, ma'am." Simone took the jumpsuit without protest. The orange was deliberate, of course, designed to mark her as a prisoner, to signal guilt before any determination had been made, to create visual shorthand for everyone in the courtroom. But it would also create contrast for anyone watching. A black woman in orange, accused of obstruction, facing a system that had already decided her fate. The imagery would be useful later. She changed quickly, efficiently, folding her linen dress and placing it with her shoes in a provided bag. Then she waited. At 8:45, Oglesby returned with 2 male deputies, neither Lundy nor anyone she'd seen before. "Transport to courthouse, ma'am. Follow us." The walk through the jail was unremarkable. Corridors, security doors, more corridors, a loading area where a white van waited with Cutler County Sheriff painted on the side. Simone climbed in without resistance, taking note of the camera mounted in the corner of the transport compartment. This one, at least, had a recording light active. The drive to the courthouse took 4 minutes. The building was red brick, 2 stories, with pillars flanking the front entrance that suggested aspirations toward grandeur the construction budget hadn't quite supported. A small crowd waited on the steps, reporters with cameras, a few civilians with signs, and one face Simone recognized immediately. Yolanda Abrams, dressed in a navy suit, standing at the edge of the crowd with a leather briefcase in one hand and a phone in the other. She'd made the 6 a.m. flight from Houston. Inside, the courtroom was smaller than Simone expected. A single-judge setup with wooden pews for spectators, a table for prosecution, a table for defense, and a raised bench where Judge Harold Pendleton was already seated, reviewing papers through reading glasses. 71 years old, according to the research Simone had done months ago when surveying Alabama's judicial landscape. Appointed, not elected, which meant less beholden to local political pressures. Reputation for fairness, or at least consistency. Not someone she'd flagged as a problem, or as an ally. The prosecution table was already occupied. Russell Day, county attorney, 50s, gray suit, red tie, the polished confidence of someone who hadn't lost a case in this courtroom in decades. Beside him sat a younger man, probably an assistant, papers spread between them. The defense table was empty. Deputies escorted Simone to the front of the courtroom and positioned her at the defense table, then retreated to the wall behind her. She sat down, folded her hands, and waited. Judge Pendleton looked up from his papers. "Miss Calloway, I see you've been charged with obstruction of governmental operations under Alabama Code Section 13-10-2 and failure to identify under Section 15-530. Do you have representation?" "I intend to represent myself for this proceeding, Your Honor." A murmur from the gallery. Day smiled slightly. A pro se defendant was easier than a real attorney, and he knew it. "You understand the risks of self-representation?" "I do, Your Honor." "Very well. Mr. Day, please state the Commonwealth's position on bail." Day rose, buttoning his jacket with practiced smoothness. "Your Honor, the defendant was stopped by deputies for a routine traffic violation and subsequently interfered with their investigation. She refused lawful commands, created a confrontational situation that required multiple backup units, and has demonstrated hostility toward law enforcement throughout the process." He paused, letting the words settle. "Given her out-of-state residence and the seriousness of the charges, the Commonwealth requests bail be set at $25,000. $25,000 for obstruction and failure to identify, charges that typically resulted in release on recognizance for first-time offenders with no prior record. The message was clear. They wanted her here as long as possible, under their control, subject to their conditions. Judge Pendleton made a note. "Ms. Calloway, response?" Simone stood. "Your Honor, before addressing the bail question, I have a preliminary matter to raise." "Proceed." "I need to disclose a potential conflict of interest that affects these proceedings." The courtroom went still. Day's confident expression flickered, just briefly. Judge Pendleton removed his reading glasses. "Go on." "My full name is Simone Adora Calloway." She kept her voice level, clear, projected for the gallery and the reporters and the record. "I am senior trial attorney with the Civil Rights Division, United States Department of Justice, Special Litigation Section." Silence. Complete, absolute silence. Day's face went white. Behind Simone, one of the deputies dropped something. A pen, maybe, or a phone. In the gallery, someone gasped. "I was traveling through Cutler County on personal leave when I was stopped by Deputy Jared Lundy without reasonable articulable suspicion. I was subsequently arrested on charges that do not meet the statutory elements as defined by Alabama law, and I was detained under conditions that may constitute violations of both state and federal standards." She reached into the memory palace she'd been building since the moment those blue lights appeared. Authorization letter from the Civil Rights Division, dated January 15, 2024, signed by Assistant Attorney General Kristen Clark. File number DJ144120. The letter confirms my authority to conduct investigations pursuant to 28 CFR Section 0.50. A copy is on file with the DOJ Office of Professional Responsibility and has been transmitted to the Federal Bureau of Investigation's Civil Rights Division as of 6:30 this morning. Day stood abruptly. "Your Honor, we need a recess to verify." "Sit down, Mr. Day." Judge Pendleton's voice carried an edge that hadn't been there before. He was looking at Simone with an expression that combined recognition, assessment, and something that might have been carefully contained alarm. "Ms. Calloway, let me understand you correctly. You are a senior trial attorney with the United States Department of Justice?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Specializing in civil rights?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Specifically, pattern or practice investigations of law enforcement agencies under 42 U.S.C. Section 14,141. Another murmur from the gallery. Everyone in that room knew what pattern or practice meant. It meant federal oversight. It meant consent decrees. It meant the end of business as usual for every law enforcement agency unlucky enough to draw DOJ's attention. And now one of DOJ's top investigators was standing in an orange jumpsuit in Cutler County, Alabama, because she'd been arrested for driving while black. Judge Pendleton turned to Day. "Mr. Day, what is your position now?" Day's mouth opened, closed, opened again. The assistant beside him was frantically typing something on a laptop, probably drafting an email to the state attorney general, probably hoping for rescue that wouldn't come in time. "Your Honor, the Commonwealth moves to—" He couldn't say it. Couldn't bring himself to admit what everyone in the room already knew. "Your Honor," Simone said, "I'll make this easier. The Commonwealth moves to dismiss all charges. I'm prepared to accept that motion, provided the record clearly reflects the circumstances under which I was arrested and the basis on which charges are being dropped." Day found his voice. "The Commonwealth moves to dismiss." "On what grounds, Mr. Day?" The question hung in the air. On what grounds? The grounds were obvious. They'd arrested a federal prosecutor, they'd fabricated charges, they'd destroyed evidence, or tried to, and they were about to face consequences they couldn't begin to imagine. But Day couldn't say any of that. Saying it would be admission. Admission would be evidence. Evidence would be used against him. "Upon further review," he finally managed, "the evidence does not support prosecution." Further review, as if someone had looked at the case overnight and discovered a flaw, rather than looked across the courtroom and discovered they'd picked the wrong target. Judge Pendleton nodded slowly. Motion to dismiss is granted. Miss Calloway, you are free to go. He paused, looking directly at her. And for the record, I apologize on behalf of this court for what you have experienced in our county. Simone didn't smile, didn't soften. Your Honor, I appreciate that. But an apology doesn't address the systemic pattern that led to my arrest, and it doesn't protect the next person, someone without my credentials, who drives through Cutler County tomorrow. She gathered the imaginary papers she didn't have, a gesture more than anything, a signal that this proceeding was concluded but the larger matter was not. I'll be in touch. The side door of the courthouse led to a hallway that led to a processing area that led eventually to freedom. Simone walked the route in the orange jumpsuit they hadn't yet replaced, passing deputies who suddenly couldn't meet her eyes, administrative staff who had very important paperwork to attend to, a facilities manager who became extremely interested in a water fountain. News traveled fast in small buildings. Yolanda was waiting in the hallway outside the processing area, having talked or bribed or bulldozed her way past whatever security was supposed to keep civilians out. Hell of a morning. Language, Yolanda laughed, a short, sharp sound that held more relief than humor. I've got your clothes in the car, backup copies of everything on 3 different cloud servers, and about 40 missed calls from Washington. Washington can wait. The Assistant Attorney General herself called, twice. Kristen can wait too. They walked together toward the parking lot exit, passing Simone's own reflection in a window. Orange jumpsuit, bare feet. They'd taken her shoes for processing and hadn't returned them. Hands still showing the bruises from Lundy's handcuffs. Evidence, all of it. Documentation of a system that thought itself untouchable. Outside, the Alabama sun was already heating the day toward another 90-degree afternoon. Yolanda's rental car waited at the curb, engine running, AC blasting. A small cluster of reporters had gathered near the main entrance, but this side door was temporarily clear. Simone had her hand on the passenger door when a voice stopped her. Miss Calloway. She turned. Sheriff Grady Fitzhugh stood 10 feet away, uniform crisp despite the heat, campaign button on his lapel, the posture of a man who'd held power in this county for 20 years and couldn't quite believe what was happening to it. Sheriff, I want you to know, this was a misunderstanding. My deputies were doing their jobs. They had no way of knowing who you were. They had every way of knowing I was a citizen with rights, Sheriff. That should have been enough. Now hold on. Deputy Lundy called in a suspected stolen vehicle without any basis other than the color of my skin and the price of my car. Deputy Adler fabricated a trafficking corridor justification that doesn't exist in any federal database. Sergeant Meacham arrested me on a charge he knew wouldn't hold, and your department attempted to delete the body cam footage that would prove all of it. Fitzhugh's face reddened. That's not... And you. Simone stepped toward him, close enough that he had to look down to meet her eyes. You've been sheriff for 20 years. You built this system. You trained these deputies. You created the culture that made them think they could do this and get away with it. I don't know what you think you're going to... Pattern or practice investigation, Sheriff. 42 U.S.C. Section 14,141. My office will be filing notice with the Federal District Court by end of business today. I suggest you retain personal counsel, not through the county, from your own funds. Because what's coming next is going to be very expensive for everyone involved. She turned back to the car. You'll be hearing from us. The door closed. Yolanda pulled away from the curb, and in the rearview mirror, Simone watched Sheriff Grady Fitzhugh standing alone on the courthouse steps, staring after them as everything he'd built began to crumble. The rental car's AC had finally brought the temperature down to something tolerable when Simone's phone buzzed with a text from a number she didn't recognize. Alabama area code. Chambers County. She opened the message. Ms. Calloway, my name is Denise Yarborough. I live 2 counties over from Cutler. I saw your case on the news this morning. The same thing happened to me 3 years ago. Same highway, same deputies. They told me if I filed a complaint, They'd make sure I never drove through Alabama again. Simone read the message twice, then typed a response. Ms. Yarborough, I'm listening. Tell me everything. Her phone buzzed again almost immediately. Not a text this time, but an incoming call from Washington. The Assistant Attorney General, probably, or the FBI field office, or the media relations team trying to get ahead of a story that was already out of their control. She declined the call. There would be time for Washington later. Time for press conferences and congressional inquiries and the slow machinery of federal justice grinding toward accountability. Right now, there was a woman in Chambers County who'd been waiting 3 years for someone to listen, and somewhere behind them on Highway 231, mile marker 42, the same biased system was still running. The same deputies were still patrolling. The same speed trap was still operating. The same blue lights were still flashing in someone else's rearview mirror. Highway robbery. The Tatum County Courthouse parking lot was full by 8:30 a.m. Camille watched from the passenger seat of Agent Prescott's unmarked sedan as vehicles streamed in from every direction. Pickup trucks with faded paint. Sedans held together by rust and prayer. A news van from Tyler, another from Dallas, a third with Houston plates that she recognized from previous investigations. Word had spread. Tomas Vega's piece went live at 6 this morning. Prescott checked her phone. Already trending on Texas Twitter. Highway robbery, inside Tatum County's $8.7 million forfeiture machine. 200,000 views and climbing. Good. I want witnesses. You'll have plenty. Prescott nodded toward the courthouse steps, where a crowd was already gathering. Black faces and white faces, young and old, some holding signs that read, "Return our property and justice for Tatum County." Looks like the victims decided to show up. Camille recognized some of them from her research. Jerome Miller, 73, whose retirement savings had been seized during a routine traffic stop 2 years ago. The Washington family, whose pickup truck was confiscated and sold at auction before they could file an appeal. Marcus Bell, standing near the back of the crowd with his arms crossed and his jaw set. These were the people she'd been fighting for, the names in her files, the statistics made human. There's something else, Prescott's voice dropped. We picked up chatter last night. Sheriff's Department knows something's coming. They've called in off-duty deputies, established a perimeter around the courthouse. Let them. Everything they do today is being documented. Camille, Prescott turned to face her directly. Once you walk through those doors, there's no going back. Your cover's already blown, but this makes it permanent. You'll never work undercover again. I know. And your family. They'll always be known as the parents of the woman who brought down the sheriff. I know that too. Camille met her gaze. Some things are worth the cost, Dana. This is one of them. Prescott nodded slowly. Then let's go make some history. They stepped out of the sedan into the October morning. The sun was bright, the air was crisp, and somewhere in the crowd, someone started applauding. It spread like fire through dry grass. One person clapping, then 10, then 50, then the entire parking lot. People who didn't know her, who had never met her, who knew only that she was the woman from the news story, the one who had refused to sign over her property, refused to be silent, refused to disappear. Camille walked toward the courthouse with her head held high and her father's words echoing in her mind. Today, you go to war. The county commissioner's court chamber occupied the second floor of the courthouse, a wood-paneled room with folding chairs arranged in rows before a raised platform where 5 commissioners sat in judgment of county business. The chamber held 60 people comfortably. Today, over 100 had squeezed inside, with more standing in the hallway and spilling down the stairs. Sheriff Judd Branham sat in the front row, flanked by Sorrells and Murdoch, all 3 in full dress uniform. His face was calm, composed, the expression of a man who had weathered storms before and expected to weather this one too. Judge Harlan Kemp occupied a seat at the commissioner's table, though he had no official role in these proceedings. His presence was a message. The system stands together. Vera Poole hovered near the door, clipboard clutched to her chest, eyes darting between the crowd and the sheriff like a nervous bird. Commissioner Harold Wilkins, a heavy-set man with a politician's smile and a rancher's handshake, called the meeting to order at 9 a.m. precisely. This is a public session of the Tatum County Commissioners Court. We will now hear from citizens who have signed up to address the board. He shuffled papers on his desk. First on the list, Ms. Camille Okonkwo. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Branham's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Camille rose from her seat in the middle of the chamber and walked to the podium facing the commissioners. She wore a charcoal blazer over a white blouse, professional attire that would photograph well for the evening news, and on her lapel, visible for the first time in public, the gold badge of the United States Department of Justice. "Good morning, Commissioners." Her voice carried clearly through the chamber, amplified by the microphone, but needing no amplification. "My name is Camille Okonkwo. I am a senior investigator with the United States Department of Justice, Civil Rights Division." The murmurs became gasps. Someone in the back of the room swore under their breath. Branham's face went from composed to ashen in the space of 3 heartbeats. "I am here today in both my official capacity and as a citizen of this county, the county where I was born, where my parents have lived for 32 years, and where, 3 weeks ago, officers of your sheriff's department illegally seized my vehicle, falsely arrested me, and held me for 72 hours without access to legal counsel." She paused, letting the words settle over the chamber like a shroud. "But I am not here to talk about my case. I am here to talk about a pattern, a practice, a systematic violation of civil rights that has been operating in this county for at least 6 years. Branham was on his feet before she finished the sentence. "This is outrageous. Commissioner Wilkins, this woman is making unfounded accusations against—" "Sit down, Sheriff." The voice came from the back of the room. Agent Prescott, flanked by 2 men in FBI windbreakers, had entered through the rear door. "This is a federal matter now. I suggest you let Ms. Okonkwo finish her statement." For a long moment, Branham stood frozen, caught between authority and resistance. Then slowly, he sank back into his chair. His hand was trembling. Camille continued as if there had been no interruption. "For the past 3 years, I have been investigating the civil asset forfeiture program operated by the Tatum County Sheriff's Office. During that time, I have documented 147 cases of property seizure." She placed a thick binder on the podium. "The evidence is contained in this file, copies of which have been provided to the FBI, the Texas Attorney General's Office, and the Houston Chronicle." She opened the binder to the first tab. Of the 147 seizures, 137 targeted people of color. That's 93%. Of the 147 individuals whose property was seized, 131 were never charged with any crime. That's 89%. The chamber was utterly silent now. Even the commissioners had stopped pretending to take notes. "The total value of property seized exceeds $8.7 million. That money has been used to fund 41% of the Sheriff's Department operating budget. In other words, this department has been financing itself by stealing from the citizens it's supposed to protect." "This is defamation." Branham's voice was hoarse. "I'll sue you for every—" "Sheriff Branham, you'll want to hear the next part." Camille's tone was ice. "Because it concerns you directly." She turned to a new section of the binder. "I have here a recording made during a traffic stop on October 15th of this year. The stop was conducted by Deputy Deke Sorrells. His body camera malfunctioned, as body cameras in this department frequently do, but the audio continued recording." She pressed a button on her phone. The recording played through the chamber's speaker system, tinny but unmistakable. "She matches the profile. Expensive car, late at night, black woman." Sorrell's voice, clear as day. Then Branham's response. "Process her. Take the car. She'll sign over eventually. They always do." Sorrells again. "What about the registration? Dispatch confirmed it's clean." And Branham, with the casual cruelty of absolute power. "Since when does that matter?" The recording ended. The silence that followed was deafening. Commissioner Wilkins cleared his throat. "Sheriff Branham, do you have a response to—" That recording is inadmissible. It was obtained during the commission of a federal crime. Agent Prescott's voice cut through his protest. Which brings me to my next point. She stepped forward, holding a folded document. Judd Branham, you are under arrest for conspiracy to deprive citizens of their civil rights under color of law, in violation of Title 18 United States Code Section 242. Deke Sorrells and Tully Murdoch, you are also under arrest on the same charges, plus additional counts of assault and false imprisonment. 2 more FBI agents entered from the side door, moving with quiet efficiency toward the front row. Branham lunged to his feet. You can't do this. I'm the sheriff of this county. I have jurisdiction. Not anymore. Prescott held up the document. This is a federal warrant signed by Judge Maria Santos of the United States District Court for the Eastern District of Texas. Your jurisdiction ended the moment you decided that your badge made you above the law. Sorrells tried to run, made it 3 steps before an agent caught him by the collar and slammed him face first into the wood paneling. Murdoch went quietly, hands behind his back, face blank with shock. Branham stood alone in the aisle, the crowd parting around him like water around a stone. This isn't over. His voice was barely a whisper. You don't know what you're starting. Camille stepped down from the podium and walked directly to him. Close enough to see the sweat beading on his forehead, the pulse jumping in his neck. Actually, Sheriff, I know exactly what I'm starting. I've been planning it for 3 years. She leaned closer, dropping her voice so only he could hear. You should have just let me go that first night, but you couldn't resist, could you? Couldn't let a black woman drive a nice car through your county without putting her in her place. I'm the one who filed those FOIA requests. I'm the one who's been building this case document by document, victim by victim. I'm the reason the Department of Justice knows every dirty secret this department has been hiding for 6 years. She stepped back. And I'm just getting started. The agents took Branham by the arms. He didn't resist. The fight had gone out of him the moment he understood how completely he'd been outmaneuvered. But as they led him toward the door, he turned back one last time. What about Kemp? What about the others? You think this changes anything? The system will protect itself. It always does. Camille looked at Judge Harlan Kemp, who was still seated at the commissioner's table, trying to appear uninvolved. That's a good question, Sheriff. Judge Kemp, would you like to comment? Kemp's face went gray. I have no idea what you're implying. I'm implying that you signed 412 forfeiture orders in the past 6 years without a single hearing, without reviewing a single piece of evidence, without ever questioning why 93% of the targets were people of color. She pulled another document from her binder. I'm also implying that you failed to disclose your familial relationship with Sheriff Branham when presiding over cases involving his department, which is a violation of Texas rules of judicial conduct and federal law. Those are administrative matters. They're criminal matters now. The Texas Commission on Judicial Conduct has been notified, as has the FBI Public Corruption Unit. She set the document on the table in front of him. You should probably call a lawyer, Your Honor. You're going to need one. The chamber erupted into chaos. Reporters shouting questions, cameras flashing, commissioners banging gavels that no one was listening to. In the midst of it all, Camille stood at the podium and let the storm wash over her. 3 years, hundreds of hours, thousands of documents. This was the moment everything changed. The arrests made national news by noon. CNN picked up the story first, then MSNBC, then Fox. By evening, every major outlet in America was running footage of Sheriff Judd Branham being led out of the Tatum County Courthouse in handcuffs, his white Stetson knocked askew, his face a mask of disbelief and fury. Camille gave 3 interviews before Agent Prescott pulled her aside and suggested she take a break. The adrenaline was wearing off, and the bruises from her time in county custody were starting to ache in ways she couldn't ignore. You did good today. Prescott handed her a bottle of water. Better than good. You might have just set precedent for federal intervention in civil forfeiture abuse cases nationwide. It's not enough. I know. Prescott's voice was gentle. But it's a start. They were standing in the parking lot of the courthouse, watching the last of the news vans pack up for the night. The crowd had dispersed. The arrests had been processed. The initial shock had faded into the complicated reality of what came next. What happens now? Pre-trial proceedings, discovery, motions, the usual dance. Prescott shrugged. Branham's already retained a high-profile defense attorney from Dallas. Sorrells and Murdoch are cooperating, which means they're probably trying to cut deals. Kemp hasn't been formally charged yet, but the Judicial Conduct Commission is moving faster than I've ever seen them move. And the victims? That's where it gets complicated. Prescott pulled out her phone, scrolling through messages. The class action suit is being filed tomorrow. 147 plaintiffs, $45 million in damages. But these things take time, years sometimes. Years. Camille let the word hang in the air. They've already waited years. Most of them have given up any hope of seeing justice. Then your job is to give them hope again. Prescott pocketed her phone. Go home, Camille. Be with your family. Tomorrow's going to be another long day. Maud. Her parents were waiting on the porch when she pulled up in the borrowed sedan. Adaize rushed down the steps before Camille could even turn off the engine, pulling her daughter into an embrace that smelled like home, palm oil and fresh bread and the particular warmth of maternal love. We saw you on the television. Her mother's voice was thick with emotion. Everyone saw you, the whole county, the whole state. Mama, you were magnificent. Adaize pulled back, holding Camille at arm's length, studying her face as if seeing her for the first time. My daughter, my brave, brilliant daughter. Emeka stood on the porch, watching. When Camille climbed the steps to join him, he simply nodded once and opened the door. Come inside. We need to talk. The conversation lasted 3 hours. Camille told them everything. The recruitment out of law school, when a professor noticed her aptitude for pattern recognition and made a phone call. The training at Quantico, disguised as a continuing education program. The early cases, small corruptions, local scandals, the bread and butter of civil rights enforcement. And then the bigger cases, the departments that operated like criminal enterprises, the sheriffs who treated their counties like personal fiefdoms, the judges who rubber-stamped injustice because it was easier than asking questions. Tatum County wasn't supposed to be personal, she said, her coffee growing cold in her hands. I identified the pattern 3 years ago during a broader investigation into Texas forfeiture practices. It was supposed to be just another case file, just another set of statistics. But then Blessing died. Emeka's voice was soft. And you came home. I came home knowing what I was walking into, knowing there was a chance they'd target me. But I couldn't stay away, Baba. Not from her funeral, not from you and Mama. She set down the cup. And once I was here, once they did exactly what I knew they would do, I couldn't pretend anymore. I couldn't be just an investigator. I had to be a witness. You could have been killed. Adayeze's hands were shaking. In that jail, when they beat you. I know, but some things are worth the risk. Silence settled over the kitchen table. Outside, crickets sang their eternal song, indifferent to the human drama unfolding within. What happens now? Emeka asked finally. To us, to the shop. To this family that everyone in the county now knows is connected to a federal investigation. I don't know. Camille met his eyes. The threats against your business, those were documented. The health inspector's report has already been challenged, but I can't promise there won't be retaliation. Can't promise some people won't decide we're too dangerous to associate with. Let them decide. Her father's voice was firm. I've been in this country for 32 years. I've survived worse than small-minded people with small-minded grudges. He reached across the table and took his daughter's hand. You did the right thing, Camille. Whatever comes next, you did the right thing. 2. The weeks that followed were a blur of depositions, hearings, and media appearances. The federal case against Branham, Sorrells, and Murdoch moved through the system with unusual speed, driven by political pressure from Austin and Washington. The evidence was overwhelming: audio recordings, document trails, victim testimonies that painted a picture of systematic abuse so stark that even the defense attorneys struggled to mount coherent objections. In November, Sorrells became the first to plead guilty. Conspiracy to deprive civil rights, carrying a maximum sentence of 10 years. He agreed to testify against his former colleagues in exchange for a recommendation of leniency. Murdoch followed 2 weeks later. Similar charges, similar deal. Branham held out until December, when the prosecution revealed additional evidence obtained from his personal computer. Emails detailing the forfeiture operation in explicit terms. Spreadsheets tracking seizure targets by race and vehicle value. Even a draft memo proposing expansion of the highway interdiction program to neighboring counties. His attorney negotiated a plea agreement: 18 months in federal prison, 3 years of supervised release, and permanent disbarment from law enforcement. It wasn't enough. Camille knew it wasn't enough. 18 months for 6 years of systematic theft, assault, and civil rights violations. 18 months for destroying families, stealing livelihoods, perpetuating a pattern of abuse that had left scars on an entire community. But it was something. It was conviction. It was accountability, however incomplete. Judge Kemp proved harder to bring down. The Judicial Conduct Commission held hearings in January. Witnesses testified about rubber-stamped orders, familial conflicts of interest, a pattern of decisions that consistently favored law enforcement over citizens' rights. The Commission's ruling came in February: public admonishment. Not removal, not disbarment, just a strongly worded letter and a requirement to complete ethics training. Kemp returned to the bench the following week, presiding over cases as if nothing had happened, the system protecting its own, just as Branham had predicted. The class action lawsuit moved more slowly. 147 plaintiffs, $45 million in damages, a legal battle that would stretch across months of discovery, motions, counter-motions, and procedural skirmishes. The county hired outside counsel, a prestigious Austin firm with deep pockets and deeper connections. They filed to dismiss on grounds of qualified immunity. When that failed, they filed to dismiss on procedural grounds. When that failed, they began drowning the plaintiffs' attorneys in document requests designed to exhaust their resources. Camille testified in 3 depositions, each lasting multiple days. The county's lawyers tried everything: impeaching her credibility, questioning her methods, suggesting that her personal involvement had tainted the investigation. She answered every question with the calm precision of someone who had spent years preparing for exactly this moment. "Ms. Okonkwo, isn't it true that you came to Tatum County specifically to manufacture evidence against the sheriff's department?" "No. I came to Tatum County for my aunt's funeral. The evidence was manufactured by Sheriff Branham and his deputies when they chose to illegally seize my property." "Isn't it true that you deliberately provoked law enforcement officers in order to create a confrontation?" "No, I exercised my constitutional rights. If that's considered provocation, then every citizen who refuses to consent to an illegal search is guilty of the same offense." "Isn't it true that you have a personal vendetta against the Tatum County Sheriff's Office?" "I have a professional commitment to civil rights enforcement. If that constitutes a vendetta, then every investigator who pursues justice is guilty of the same commitment." The depositions ended without the county gaining any useful ammunition. But the lawsuit ground on. March brought an unexpected development. Camille was in Houston reviewing case files in her apartment when her phone rang. Unknown number. "Ms. Okonkwo? This is Tomas Vega. We met briefly after the commissioner's court hearing." I remember. The journalist who had broken the story, whose article had brought the crowds to the courthouse. "What can I do for you?" "I've been investigating a related matter, something that might interest you." His voice was careful, measured. "Can we meet? In person?" They met at a coffee shop in Tyler, neutral ground for both of them. Vega was younger than she'd expected, early 30s, with the tired eyes of someone who'd seen too much and couldn't stop looking. "I've been tracking civil forfeiture operations across East Texas," he said, sliding a folder across the table. "Tatum County isn't unique. It's not even the worst offender." Camille opened the folder. Maps, statistics, names of sheriffs and judges and county officials, connected by lines that suggested patterns she hadn't yet identified. "What am I looking at?" "A network, or at least the beginnings of one." Vega leaned forward. "After your story broke, I started getting calls, tips, documents from people who'd seen what happened in Tatum County and recognized it in their own jurisdictions." "How many?" 12 counties so far, all in East Texas, all with similar patterns, high forfeiture rates, disproportionate targeting of minorities, no meaningful oversight." He tapped the folder. "And all of them connected by a common thread." "Which is?" "Training. Every sheriff's department in these counties sent officers to the same highway interdiction seminars, funded by the Texas Association of Counties, taught by a private consulting firm called Pinnacle Enforcement Solutions." Camille studied the documents. Names she didn't recognize, but patterns she did. The same techniques, the same language, the same systematic approach to turning traffic stops into revenue generators. "Branham didn't invent this," she said slowly. "He was taught." "Exactly. And the people who taught him are still teaching, still running seminars, still spreading this model to departments across the state." "Why are you telling me this?" Vega met her eyes. "Because you're the only person who's ever successfully prosecuted one of these operations. And because if someone doesn't stop Pinnacle, what happened in Tatum County is going to happen in 100 other counties across Texas." She closed the folder. "I'm not sure I'm the right person for this. My cover's blown. My name's in every newspaper in the state." "That's exactly why you're the right person. You have credibility now, visibility. When you speak, people listen." He pushed the folder toward her. "Take it. Read it. And if you decide this fight is worth continuing, call me." She took the folder. April brought resolution of the class action lawsuit, but not the resolution anyone had expected. The county offered to settle. $12 million, divided among 147 plaintiffs. No admission of wrongdoing. No policy changes. No commitment to reform. The plaintiff's attorneys recommended acceptance. The money was real, immediate, certain. A trial could drag on for years, might result in nothing, would definitely exhaust everyone involved. Camille sat in the back of the room when the victims voted on whether to accept. One by one, they spoke. Jerome Miller, who had lost his retirement savings, 12 million divided by 147 is less than 100,000 each. That doesn't even cover what they took from me, let alone 7 years of fighting to get it back. The Washington family, who had lost their truck. They want us to take their money and shut up. That's what this is, buying our silence. Marcus Bell, who had never been a victim himself, but had watched his community suffer. If we take this deal, nothing changes. They'll just be more careful next time, more sophisticated. The system survives. The vote was 63 to 84 against acceptance. The lawsuit would go to trial. The trial began in May and lasted 3 weeks. Camille testified on the 4th day, 8 hours in the witness chair, walking the jury through 3 years of investigation, explaining patterns and practices, identifying victims and perpetrators, constructing a narrative of systematic abuse that left several jurors visibly shaken. The county's defense was predictable. Isolated incidents, rogue officers, no evidence of official policy. The lawyers painted Branham as a bad apple, not a symptom of a diseased orchard. But the evidence told a different story. Email after email. Memo after memo. Victim after victim. Taking the stand and describing their experiences in words that cut through legal abstractions and touched something human in the people deciding their fate. The jury deliberated for 2 days. The verdict: liability established on all counts. Compensatory damages, $31 million. Punitive damages, $14 million. Total award, $45 million. Exactly what the plaintiffs had sought. The courtroom erupted when the verdict was read. Victims weeping, embracing, releasing years of grief and anger in a single cathartic moment. Attorneys shaking hands, reporters scrambling for quotes, the machinery of justice grinding towards something that almost looked like accountability. Camille slipped out through a side door before anyone could ask her for a statement. She found a bench in the courthouse corridor and sat down, suddenly exhausted. 3 years, thousands of hours, the career-ending choice to reveal herself. The beatings, the threats, the constant pressure. It was over, or at least this part was over. Her phone buzzed. A text from her father. "We saw the news. Come home. Your mother is making jollof rice." She smiled for the first time in weeks. Home. Yes, that sounded right. The aftermath unfolded over the following months. The county appealed the verdict, as everyone expected. The case would wind through the appellate system for years, the final outcome uncertain. But the plaintiff's attorneys had structured the award carefully, enough money set aside to survive appeals, enough precedent established to make reversal difficult. Branham served his 18 months in a federal facility in Louisiana. He was released in October with 3 years of supervised probation and a permanent ban from law enforcement. Last anyone heard, he was working as a security consultant for a private firm in Oklahoma, far from Texas, far from the county he'd once ruled like a personal kingdom. Sorrells and Murdoch served lesser sentences, both released within a year. Neither returned to Tatum County. Judge Kemp continued to serve on the bench, though his docket had mysteriously lightened. Few attorneys chose to appear before him, if they had any alternative. Vera Poole retired from her position as county clerk, citing health reasons. She was replaced by a younger woman who actually processed forms when citizens requested them. The consent decree negotiated between the county and the DOJ went into effect in September. An independent federal monitor would oversee the sheriff's department for 36 months. New policies on traffic stops, asset forfeiture, and use of force were mandated. Body cameras would be worn at all times, with footage stored on federal servers beyond the reach of local manipulation. It was reform. Real reform. The kind that might actually make a difference. Or it might be window dressing, changed procedures that would be quietly ignored once the spotlight moved elsewhere. Time would tell. 6 months after the trial, Camille returned to Hawkins. The town looked the same water tower, same church, same row of storefronts on Main Street. But something had shifted in the air, some quality of tension that had relaxed imperceptibly in the months since Branham's fall. Her parents' shop was still open, the hand-painted sign still hanging where it had hung for 30 years. Business had actually improved since the trial. People who had avoided the Okonkwo's for fear of association now sought them out, wanting to be connected to the family that had stood up and won. "The mayor came by last week," her father said as they sat on the porch, watching the sun set over the pine trees. "Wanted to give us a commendation, a certificate of appreciation from the county." "Did you accept it?" "I told him to give it to the families who are still waiting for their property to be returned." Emeka shook his head slowly. $45 million awarded, but the appeals could take years. Meanwhile, the county is claiming poverty, saying they can't pay until the legal process is complete. They'll pay eventually. The judgment is solid. Eventually. Her father repeated the word with the weariness of a man who had learned not to trust promises. How many of those families will still be alive when eventually arrives? It was a fair question. Camille didn't have a good answer. "What about you?" Emeka asked. "What's next? Back to Houston? Back to the department?" "I'm not sure." She stared at the horizon, where the sky was turning shades of orange and purple. "After what happened here, after going public, I can't do undercover work anymore. My face is too well known. My name is too connected to this case." "So what will you do?" "Maybe something different. Maybe something that uses what happened here instead of pretending it didn't." She turned to look at him. "Tomas Vega, the journalist, he showed me evidence of similar operations in 12 other counties across East Texas. Same patterns, same training, Same systematic abuse. You want to keep fighting. Someone has to, and now I have something I didn't have before. What's that? Visibility, credibility, a platform. She smiled slightly. When I speak now, people listen. That's worth something. Emeka was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached over and took her hand. Your Aunt Blessing would be proud of you. She always said you were destined for something important, something that would make a difference. I wish she could have seen it. She did see it, in her own way. He squeezed her fingers. She saw who you were becoming, long before you did. The final hearing in the case came in November, almost exactly a year after the arrests. It was a procedural matter, confirmation of the consent decree, formal establishment of the federal monitor, administrative details that most people would find mind-numbingly dull. But Camille attended anyway, sitting in the back of the courtroom, watching the machinery of justice grind through its final motions. The new sheriff, an outsider from Houston, appointed by the governor after Branham's removal, stood at the podium and pledged cooperation with federal oversight. The county commissioners, some of them new faces elected in the wake of the scandal, nodded solemnly and expressed their commitment to reform. Words, promises, the same language that had been used 1,000 times before, in 1,000 courtrooms, by 1,000 officials who would quietly return to business as usual once the cameras stopped rolling. But maybe this time would be different. Maybe the evidence was too damning, the pressure too sustained, the victims too organized to be ignored. Maybe. After the hearing, Camille walked out into the November sunshine. The courthouse steps were empty now, the crowds long since dispersed. But as she reached the bottom, a voice called out behind her. Miss Okonkwo. She turned. A young woman was hurrying down the steps, early 20s, dark-skinned, wearing the cautious expression of someone approaching a celebrity. I'm sorry to bother you, but I wanted to thank you. For what? My grandmother was one of the victims, Eldora Price. They took her car in 2019. She died last year, before she could see any of this. The woman's voice caught. But she followed your case. Followed everything you did. She said it was the first time she'd ever felt like someone was actually fighting for people like us. Camille didn't know what to say. The weight of that responsibility, the trust of people she'd never met, the hope of families she couldn't save, pressed down on her shoulders like a physical burden. I'm sorry about your grandmother. Don't be sorry. Be proud. The young woman met her eyes. You did something nobody else could do. You made them pay attention. You made them care. It's not enough. No, it's never enough. The woman smiled slightly. But it's something, and something is more than we had before. She walked away before Camille could respond, disappearing into the parking lot, just another citizen going about her life in a county that had been irrevocably changed. Camille stood alone on the courthouse steps, thinking about patterns and practices, about systems and individuals, about the endless struggle between power and accountability. The case was closed. The verdicts were delivered. The reforms were in place. But in her briefcase, there was a folder. 12 counties, 12 sheriff's departments, 12 communities suffering the same abuses that Tatum County had suffered. Tomas Vega's words echoed in her memory. If someone doesn't stop Pinnacle, what happened in Tatum County is going to happen in 100 other counties across Texas. She pulled out her phone and dialed a number from memory. Agent Prescott? It's Camille. I think we need to talk about next steps. 3 weeks later, an anonymous tip arrived at the offices of the Houston Chronicle. The package contained 400 pages of internal documents from Pinnacle Enforcement Solutions, training materials, client lists, financial records that showed money flowing from county governments to a private company that had turned civil rights violations into a profitable business model. Tomas Vega broke the story on a Tuesday morning. By Wednesday, the Texas Attorney General had opened an investigation. By Friday, 3 more counties had announced suspensions of their highway interdiction programs pending review. Camille watched the news coverage from her apartment in Houston, surrounded by case files and legal briefs and the accumulated evidence of 3 years of work that was finally bearing fruit. Her phone rang, her father's number. "We saw the news," Emeka said. "The Pinnacle story. That was you, wasn't it?" "I can neither confirm nor deny." Which means yes. She could hear the smile in his voice. "Your mother wants to know when you're coming home for Christmas." "I'm not sure yet. There's a lot happening." "There's always a lot happening, but family is family, Camille. Don't forget that." "I won't, Baba." "And Camille?" "Yes?" "Be careful. The bigger the target, the harder they fight back." "I know. I'm counting on it." She ended the call and turned back to her laptop, where another email had arrived. Another tip, another county, another pattern waiting to be documented. The fight was far from over, but for the first time in a long time, Camille Okonkwo felt something that might have been hope. Epilogue. 1 year later, the gas station on Highway 259 looked exactly as it had looked 2 years earlier, when Camille first stopped there on her way to Hawkins. Same pumps, same convenience store, same patrol car parked across the street. But the deputy inside the patrol car was different, younger, wearing a body camera that actually recorded, following procedures that actually meant something. Camille filled her tank and went inside to pay. The clerk, a teenager she didn't recognize, barely glanced at her as she handed over her credit card. "Nice weather we're having," he said. "It is." "You from around here?" "I used to be." She took her receipt. "Still have family in Hawkins." "Oh yeah? What's your name?" She smiled. "Okonkwo. Camille Okonkwo." The clerk's eyes widened slightly. Recognition flickered across his face. "You're the one who... my mom talks about you. Says you're the reason things are different now." "Things aren't different enough yet. But we're working on it." She walked back to her car, a new Range Rover, purchased with the settlement from her own civil rights claim against the county. The same model, the same color. A deliberate choice. As she pulled onto Highway 259, she glanced in her rearview mirror. The patrol car hadn't moved. The deputy inside wasn't following her. Progress. Small, incremental, easily reversed, but progress nonetheless. Her phone buzzed with a text from Agent Prescott. "Pinnacle's CEO just resigned. DOJ opening formal investigation. Call me when you get a chance." Camille smiled and pressed the accelerator, heading north toward Hawkins, toward her parents, toward the place that had made her who she was. The road stretched out ahead, empty and open, full of possibility. Behind her, Tatum County receded in the mirror, smaller and smaller, until it disappeared entirely. But she knew she'd be back. Knew there would always be another fight, another injustice, another system in need of exposure. That was the nature of the work. It never ended. It just evolved. And Camille Okonkwo had learned to evolve with it. The call came at 3:17 a.m. on a Tuesday in March. Camille was already awake, hunched over her laptop in the cramped office space the Civil Rights Accountability Project had rented above a Vietnamese restaurant in Houston's Midtown district. The smell of pho broth drifted up through the floorboards, mingling with stale coffee and the particular exhaustion of a woman who had forgotten what 8 hours of sleep felt like. Her phone buzzed against the desk. Unknown number. East Texas area code. "This is Okonkwo." Silence on the other end. Then breathing. Ragged. Frightened. "Ms. Okonkwo? The one from the news?" "Yes. Who is this?" I need to tell you something. But if they find out I called..." The voice was female. Young. Trembling with the particular terror of someone who had seen something they weren't supposed to see. "You're safe. This line is encrypted. Take your time." More breathing. A muffled sob, then words tumbling out in a rush. I work dispatch for the Harrison County Sheriff's Office. 3 nights ago, a deputy brought in a man. Black, maybe 40 years old. Said he was picked up on a DUI. But I watched the booking footage. That man wasn't drunk. He was terrified. Camille's fingers were already moving across her keyboard, pulling up files on Harrison County, East Texas, population 65,000. Sheriff named Wade Pemberton. No significant flags in her database, but that meant nothing. The worst abuses always happened in the places no one was watching. What happened to him? That's why I'm calling. He never made it to the jail. What do you mean? I mean he disappeared. No booking record. No intake paperwork. The deputy who brought him in, his body camera was turned off the whole shift. And when I asked my supervisor about it the next morning, he told me I must have imagined the whole thing. Camille stopped typing. Did you get a name? The man who was brought in? I saw his license when they ran his plates. Marcus Webb. Houston address. He was driving a Mercedes. Expensive car. Black man. Late night. The pattern that never died, no matter how many consent decrees were signed. Did you document any of this? Write anything down? I took photos of the computer screen before they deleted the records, and I saved a copy of the radio traffic from that night. I know it's not much, but I didn't know what else to do. I didn't know who else to call. You did the right thing. Can you get those files to me? I think so. But Ms. Okonkwo, you don't understand. This isn't just one man. I've been working dispatch for 8 months, and this is the 4th time someone's just vanished. 4th time the records were wiped. 4th time I was told to forget what I saw. Camille leaned back in her chair, her mind racing through implications. 4 disappearances. 4 cover-ups. A sheriff's department operating with the same impunity Tatum County had enjoyed before she tore it apart. What's your name? Hesitation. If I tell you, they'll know it was me. I can protect you. We have resources now. Safe houses, legal representation. But I need to know who I'm working with. A long pause. Then, Destiny. Destiny Rawlings. Destiny, I need you to listen carefully. Tomorrow morning you're going to call in sick. Food poisoning. Something that buys you at least 3 days. Then you're going to drive to Houston. There's a hotel on Westheimer called the Coronado. Ask for a room under the name Thompson. I'll meet you there at noon. And if they come looking for me before then? They won't. They don't know you've seen what you've seen. As far as they're concerned, you're just another dispatcher who follows orders and doesn't ask questions. Camille paused. But Destiny. Bring everything, every photo, every recording, every scrap of evidence you've collected, because once we start this, there's no going back. The line went quiet. When Destiny spoke again, her voice was steadier. I'll be there. The Coronado Hotel was a relic of 1970s Houston, all orange carpet and wood paneling, and the faint smell of cigarettes that no amount of renovation could entirely erase. Camille had used it for meetings before, anonymous enough to avoid attention, shabby enough that no one asked questions. Destiny Rawlings arrived at 12:14, carrying a backpack stuffed with documents and an expression that suggested she hadn't slept since their phone call. She was 26 years old, Camille learned over the next 3 hours. Born in Marshall, raised in Longview, hired by Harrison County straight out of community college because her uncle knew someone who knew someone. 8 months on the job, and she'd already seen enough to destroy her faith in the institution she'd thought she was serving. The first one was in August, Destiny said, spreading photographs across the hotel room's scarred coffee table. Man named Jerome Patterson, pulled over for a broken taillight, brought to the station at 11:47 p.m., never processed, never seen again. Did you report it? I tried. My supervisor said Patterson must have been released without paperwork. Administrative oversight. Happens all the time. But you didn't believe him. I ran Patterson's name through every database I could access. No booking record anywhere in Texas. No release record. No transfer to another facility. It's like he just evaporated. Camille studied the photographs. Grainy shots of computer screens, timestamps visible in the corners. Radio logs showing patrol units in locations that didn't match official reports. A pattern of discrepancies that would be invisible to anyone not specifically looking for them. The Mercedes driver, Marcus Webb. You said he was the fourth. Third that I witnessed directly. But I started digging after Patterson. Found references to at least 6 others over the past 2 years. All black men. All driving cars that someone decided they shouldn't be driving. All vanished without a trace. And Sheriff Pemberton? Destiny's face hardened. He's the one giving the orders. I heard him on the radio the night Marcus Webb was brought in. Told the deputy to take him to the facility. I don't know what that means, but it's not anywhere in official county records. The facility. Camille felt a chill that had nothing to do with the hotel's aggressive air conditioning. This wasn't civil forfeiture. This was something else. Something darker. Destiny, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. In your 8 months at that department, did you ever hear anyone mention human trafficking? The younger woman went pale. Why would you ask that? Because 9 black men don't just disappear without someone profiting from it. And there's only so many things that profit looks like. Destiny was silent for a long moment. Then she reached into her backpack and pulled out one more photograph, this one different from the others. Not a computer screen, but a physical document, a shipping manifest. I found this in the shredder, or what was left of it. Someone didn't do a very good job destroying it. Camille took the torn paper, piecing together what remained of the text. Dates, locations, numbers that might have been prices, and names, 9 names, including Marcus Webb. Where was this supposed to be shipped? Louisiana, I think. There's a partial address, somewhere near the border. The pieces were falling into place, forming a picture that was worse than anything Camille had imagined. Not just corruption, not just theft. An actual pipeline, moving human beings from East Texas to destinations unknown for purposes she didn't want to contemplate. Destiny, I need you to understand something. What you've uncovered isn't just a civil rights violation. It's federal crime on a scale that makes Tatum County look like jaywalking. The people running this operation will kill to protect it. They may have already killed. I know. Destiny's voice was small but steady. That's why I called you, because everyone else is either too scared or too compromised to do anything about it. Camille looked at the young woman across the table, this dispatcher from a nowhere county who had stumbled onto something monstrous and decided to fight instead of run. Okay, she reached for her phone. Let's make some calls. The investigation that followed made the Tatum County case look like a warm-up exercise. Within 72 hours, Camille had assembled a team. Agent Prescott from the FBI, now heading a multi-agency task force on law enforcement corruption. Tomas Vega, whose investigative resources had expanded considerably since his pinnacle exposé. 2 former federal prosecutors who had joined the Civil Rights Accountability Project specifically because they were tired of watching cases disappear into bureaucratic quicksand. And Destiny Rawlings, who had gone from terrified whistleblower to crucial witness in the space of a week. The evidence she had gathered, combined with federal subpoena power, began to paint a picture that stretched far beyond Harrison County. Sheriff Pemberton was connected to a network of private detention facilities operating along the Texas-Louisiana border, facilities that weren't registered with any state agency, didn't appear on any maps, and had been receiving transfers from multiple East Texas sheriff's departments for at least 5 years. It's a labor trafficking operation, Prescott explained during a briefing 2 weeks into the investigation. They pick up black men with out-of-state plates, usually driving nice cars. Profile says they have resources, connections, someone who might pay ransom or provide labor value. They process them through the county system just long enough to establish a paper trail that can be destroyed, then move them to the facilities. And then? Best case, they're being held for ransom. Worst case, forced labor. Agricultural work, construction, things that require muscle and don't ask questions about documentation. Prescott's face was grim. We've identified 11 facilities so far. Conservative estimate of current detainees is between 40 and 60 individuals. 40 to 60 human beings, held against their will, in the United States, in the 21st century. How do we get them out? Carefully. These facilities have security. Some of the operators have law enforcement backgrounds, which means they know our playbook. If we spook them, they might move the detainees, or worse, eliminate the evidence. Then we don't spook them. Camille studied the map on the wall, red pins marking each known facility. We hit them all at once. That would require coordination across 3 federal agencies and 6 state jurisdictions. The paperwork alone would take months. Then we bypass the paperwork. She turned to face Prescott directly. You have emergency powers under the Trafficking Victims Protection Act. Imminent threat to life. We can document that easily based on what Destiny has already provided. Prescott hesitated. If we move too fast and it falls apart, the people we're trying to save could pay the price. If we move too slow, they're paying the price anyway. Every day we wait is another day someone is being held in one of those facilities against their will. Camille's voice hardened. I didn't spend 3 years building a case against Tatum County just to watch the same system operate on a larger scale, 1 county over. We end this, now. The raids took place on a Thursday morning in April. Simultaneous operations across 11 locations in Texas and Louisiana. FBI, DEA, Homeland Security Investigations, and state law enforcement from both states, coordinated through a command center in Houston that Camille watched from a secure observation room. The first facility fell within minutes, a converted warehouse outside Marshall that had been listed as agricultural storage. Federal agents found 23 men inside, all of them African American, all of them held in conditions that would have been criminal for livestock. The second facility, near the Louisiana border, put up resistance. Gunfire exchanged for 17 minutes before the operators surrendered. 2 federal agents wounded, 1 seriously. 3 operators killed, 14 detainees recovered. By sunset, 61 victims had been rescued from 11 facilities. 47 operators had been arrested, including Sheriff Wade Pemberton, who was taken into custody at his home in Marshall while his wife watched in horror. The news coverage was immediate and overwhelming. National outlets led with footage of the warehouse conditions. International media picked up the story within hours. The phrase "modern slavery ring" appeared in headlines across the world. And somewhere in the chaos, Camille found Destiny Rawlings standing outside the Houston Command Center, watching the sun set over the city skyline. You did this, Camille said, joining her at the railing. If you hadn't made that call, those 61 people would still be in those facilities. Some of them might have died there. Destiny shook her head. I just told you what I saw. You're the one who did something about it. That's how it works. One person sees, one person speaks, and then other people listen. Camille put a hand on her shoulder. You should be proud. I don't feel proud, I feel... Destiny struggled for words. I keep thinking about all the ones we didn't save. The ones who went through that system before I started paying attention. The ones who might still be out there in facilities we haven't found yet. There will always be ones we don't save. That's the hardest part of this work. Accepting that you can't save everyone, but you have to keep fighting anyway. How do you do it? Keep going, I mean. After everything you've seen. Camille considered the question. Thought about Tatum County, about Branham's face when he realized he'd been outmaneuvered, about the $45 million verdict and the families who were still waiting for justice years later. I think about my father, she said finally. He's been in this country for 35 years now, built a business from nothing, raised a family, survived things that would have broken most people, and every single day he gets up and keeps going. Not because he thinks he can fix everything, but because giving up isn't who he is. That sounds exhausting. It is, but it's also the only way I know how to live. Camille turned to face Destiny directly. The question is, what are you going to do now? You can't go back to Harrison County. That life is over. But you have skills, courage, a willingness to see things that other people choose to ignore. Those are rare. Are you offering me a job? I'm offering you a choice. You can take the witness protection the FBI is offering. Start over somewhere safe. Put all of this behind you. Or you can keep fighting. Join us. Help find the next Tatum County before it becomes a Harrison County. Destiny was quiet for a long moment, watching the city lights flicker to life below. I think, she said slowly, that I'd like to keep fighting. Camille smiled. Good, because we have a lot of work to do. The trials lasted 18 months. Wade Pemberton was convicted on 47 federal counts, including human trafficking, conspiracy, and deprivation of civil rights. Sentenced to life without possibility of parole. 31 other defendants received sentences ranging from 10 years to life. 6 pleaded guilty and cooperated with ongoing investigations that uncovered connections to trafficking operations in 3 additional states. The Harrison County Sheriff's Office was dissolved entirely by state order. The county contracted with Texas Rangers for law enforcement services, while a new department was built from the ground up. And somewhere in the aftermath, a piece of legislation began working its way through the Texas State House. Sponsored by a coalition of representatives from both parties, drafted with input from the Civil Rights Accountability Project, it proposed the most comprehensive law enforcement accountability measures in the state's history. They called it the Marcus Webb Act, after one of the men rescued from the Marshall warehouse. Webb had testified before the legislature in person, describing his 47 days in captivity, the conditions he'd endured, the moment when federal agents broke down the door and told him he was free. I thought I was going to die in that place, he said, his voice steady despite the cameras and the crowd. I thought nobody was looking for me. Nobody cared. But someone was looking. Someone did care. He turned to look at Camille, seated in the gallery behind him. I don't know how to repay that. But I know I want to spend the rest of my life making sure nobody else goes through what I went through. The bill passed the House by a margin of 127 to 23. The Senate followed 2 weeks later. The governor signed it into law on a sunny afternoon in October, surrounded by survivors, advocates, and the young dispatcher from Harrison County who had started it all with a phone call at 3:17 a.m. The night after the signing ceremony, Camille drove to Hawkins. She found her parents on the porch, as she always found them, watching the stars emerge over the East Texas pines. Her father had aged in the years since Tatum County, more gray in his hair, more lines around his eyes, but his back was still straight and his voice was still strong. We saw the ceremony, Adeyeze said, making room for Camille on the porch swing. The governor shaking your hand, all those people clapping. It's not about me, Mama. It's about the people who suffered, the people who spoke up. It's always about you and not about you. Her father's voice carried the gentle teasing of a man who knew his daughter too well to let her hide behind false modesty. That's the paradox of this work, isn't it? You have to believe you can make a difference, while also accepting that the difference isn't about you. Baba, when did you become a philosopher? I've always been a philosopher. I just kept it hidden behind measuring tape and thread. They sat together as the darkness deepened, 3 people on a porch in a small town that had somehow become the epicenter of a civil rights revolution. What comes next? Adeyeze asked eventually. After Harrison County, after the new law, what's the next fight? Camille thought about the files on her desk in Houston. The tips that came in every day now, from dispatchers and deputies and citizens who had seen something wrong and decided to speak. The network of advocates and investigators and journalists who had coalesced around her work, turning one woman's crusade into a movement. I don't know exactly, she admitted, but I know it's out there. There's always another county. Her father reached over and took her hand, the same gesture he'd made on the night before the Tatum County hearing, when everything had been uncertain and the stakes had felt impossibly high. Then you'll never fight alone. Camille squeezed his fingers and looked out at the stars, thinking about all the battles still to come, all the victims still waiting for justice, all the work that would never truly be finished. But for now, in this moment, she was home, and that was enough.
Thank you for taking the time to watch this video today. If you found the content helpful, please remember to like and subscribe so you won't miss our upcoming episodes. If you have any questions or suggestions, feel free to leave a comment below. We are always here to listen.